Welcome to the Crazy Alchemist podcast, where alchemy, occultism, and strange history come alive.
In the center of Piazza Statuto, on the western edge of Turin, a winged figure sits on a pile of rough stone. It was carved in 1879 to honor the workers who died excavating the Frejus tunnel through the Alps. On its head sits a five-pointed star. The city says it represents the genius of science, reason triumphing over brute force. Occultists see something else. They see Lucifer. A few meters away, a manhole cover opens onto the control room of Turin's entire sewer network. Locals call it the gateway to hell. They only half mean it as a joke. Turin is the only city in the world that claims membership in two legendary triangles. The white magic triangle connects it to Lyon and Prague. The black magic triangle connects it to London and San Francisco. One supposedly channels positive energy, the other channels something darker. Whether either triangle means anything at all is a separate question, but the fact that Turin ended up at the center of both is not an accident. It is the result of a dynasty that spent 400 years building an alternative sacred city and a bronze tablet with fake hieroglyphs that accidentally became one of the most influential esoteric objects in European history. The Romans founded Augusta Taurinorum in 28 BC, and they built it on a grid with clear rules. The eastern half faced sunrise, markets, business, the living. The western half faced sunset, the dead, the executed, the necropolis. This was standard Roman urban planning, not occultism. But in Turin, the layout survived into the modern city's bones. Piazza Statuto still sits in the west. The area called the Heart of White Magic, Piazza Castello, still sits in the east. The polarity between light and dark was baked into the street grid before anyone called it magical. Every article about esoteric Turin repeats the founding myth. The Egyptian goddess Isis commanded her son, Phtone, to travel north and build a city where the Po meets the Dora Riparia. The story sounds ancient. It is not. The myth was invented in 1577 by Filiberto Pingone, a court historian paid by Duke Emanuele Filiberto of Savoy. The Duke had just moved his capital to Turin, and a grand city needed a grand origin story. Pingone's primary source was a known forgery published in 1498. The chain is clean: a forged source, a paid commission, and a later elaboration. All three writers served the House of Savoy.
But the object that anchored this fabrication to physical reality was real. In 1630, Duke Carlo Emanuele I acquired the Mensa Isiaca, one of the most consequential objects in the history of Western esotericism. It is a large bronze tabletop, over a meter wide, inlaid with polychrome metal figures of Egyptian gods using at least 7 distinct alloys. The central figure is Isis, seated on a throne. The borders are filled with what appear to be hieroglyphs. The hieroglyphs are meaningless. The craftsmen who made the Mensa knew what Egyptian gods looked like, but could not read or write the script. A 2023 study confirmed the object was made in Rome in the 1st century, probably for the great temple of Isis on the Campus Martius. The metalwork was authentically Egyptian in technique. The text was decorative gibberish. What happened next is one of the great ironies of intellectual history. The German Jesuit Athanasius Kircher used this tablet as his primary source for the most ambitious attempt to decode hieroglyphs before Champollion. His translations were entirely fabricated. In 1781, a French pastor used the same tablet to argue that tarot cards were of Egyptian origin. In 1888, the co-founder of the Golden Dawn connected its imagery to the tarot trumps. Aleister Crowley continued the chain. None of it was true. The Mensa was Roman, not Egyptian. Its hieroglyphs said nothing. Tarot originated as a card game in 15th century northern Italy, but this Roman forgery with nonsense writing became the most influential Egyptian artifact in Western occultism. Here is something the esoteric guides almost never mention. Every guide says the Gran Madre di Dio church was built on the ruins of a temple to Isis. No evidence supports this. But a real, excavated, confirmed sanctuary of Isis and Serapis exists 30 kilometers east of Turin, at the Roman city of Industria. 2 temples dedicated to Isis and Serapis were built there in the 1st century. The sanctuary had wells, meeting rooms, houses for priests, and altars. Excavations ran from 1981 to 2003. This is the real archaeological footprint of Egyptian religion near Turin, not a legend, not a theory. 2 excavated temples. And Turin built its Egyptian identity on a fabricated myth and a Roman bronze tablet, while the actual Egyptian religious site sat quietly along the Po, ignored by everyone telling the esoteric version of the story.
Why would a European royal dynasty spend 4 centuries building an occult identity for their capital? The answer is not occultism, it is politics. The House of Savoy needed Turin to be sacred on its own terms because their political project required breaking with Rome. In 1453, they acquired the Shroud and kept it under dynastic, not church, control. In 1577, they commissioned the Egyptian founding myth. In 1630, they acquired the Mensa Isaica. In 1668, they commissioned Guarino Guarini, a priest who was also a mathematician, to build the chapel of the Holy Shroud. Guarini's chapel encoded Hermetic symbolism. The number 3 governed everything, pentagons represented the 5 wounds of Christ, and the dome used Islamic interlacing arches borrowed from the Mosque of Cordoba. This was not a standard church. It was a Masonic and Hermetic theater for displaying the dynasty's most powerful relic. In 1824, King Carlo Felice paid 400,000 lira, an entire year's national income, to buy the Dravetti collection and create the world's first Egyptian museum. The western half of Turin collected dark landmarks the way other cities collect churches. At Via 20 September 40 stands a massive carved wooden door built in 1675 with a bronze knocker in the shape of Satan's face, horned, open-mouthed, with 2 snakes emerging from it. The building housed a tarot card factory. The devil is card number 15 in the major arcana. The building's old street number was also 15. Nearby, at Via Lascaris, a former Masonic lodge has rows of eye-shaped slits around its perimeter, the Occhi del Diavolo, the devil's eyes. They were ventilation openings for underground rooms. Walk east and the atmosphere changes. The Fontana Angelica in Piazza Solferino holds more than most visitors notice. 2 male figures represent the pillars Boaz and Jachin from Solomon's temple. Pomegranates appear throughout the stonework. In Masonic iconography, the pomegranate represents hidden knowledge. The clergy noticed. The sculptor had proposed placing the fountain beside the cathedral. The church rejected it. The symbolism was too visible. It was installed in Piazza Solferino instead, far enough from the cathedral to avoid further complaint. The visitor with the strongest documented connection to the city is Friedrich Nietzsche. He lived at Via Carlo Alberto VI from April 1888. He wrote Ecce Homo, The Antichrist, Twilight of the Idols, and The Case of Wagner during those months. He loved Turin, its classical arcades, its absence of stifling piety. On January 3, 1889, Nietzsche collapsed in Piazza Carlo Alberto. The famous version of the story says he threw his arms around a horse being beaten by a coachman. That detail was added in the 1930s. The first account mentions the collapse but says nothing about a horse. In his final lucid days, he sent letters across Europe signed Dionysus and the Crucified One. The painter Giorgio de Chirico later called Turin the most disquieting city in the entire world. The Shroud appeared in the historical record around 1353. The Savoys acquired it in 1453 and kept it for 5 centuries under dynastic control, not the churches. In 1988, 3 laboratories radiocarbon dated a sample to the years 1260 to 1390. The cloth appeared medieval. In 2022, a new study using X-ray scattering suggested the fabric was approximately 2,000 years old. The 2 results contradict each other. Neither has been withdrawn. On April 11, 1997, fire destroyed Guarini's chapel. Firefighters smashed through bulletproof glass with a sledgehammer to rescue the shroud minutes before the roof collapsed. The restoration took 21 years. The most famous statistic about Turin's occult life, that 40,000 Satanists operated in the city, was a hoax. Between 1968 and 1972, a group of university pranksters fabricated the claim and got it published in the local evening paper. Fewer than 200 practicing Satanists actually lived in the city. In 1986, Der Spiegel devoted 4 pages to Turin's passion for Satan. The magazine was amplifying a university prank nearly 20 years old. Turin's occult reputation is built on real things: a Roman necropolis, a dynasty's 4th-century political project, documented Masonic networks, an Egyptian museum funded at the cost of a year's national income, and architecture designed by a priest who encoded hermetic symbols into the chapel of a contested relic. It is also built on fabrications: a forged founding myth, a bronze tablet with gibberish text, a university prank, and a magazine article that treated the prank as news. The city does not sort these layers for you. It holds them all at once, the real and the invented, the documented and the legendary, and it lets you decide what to do with the pile. That may be the most honest thing about Turin's relationship with magic. It gives you the evidence. It does not tell you what it means. If you enjoyed this, subscribe and leave a comment. Every story on this channel started as a question that wouldn't go away. If Turin raised one for you, let me know.
If you enjoyed today's episode, make sure to visit crazyalchemist.com for more intriguing content and follow Crazy Alchemist on Instagram and Facebook to stay connected.